When desire leads, destiny suffers. When desire leads, destiny suffers. This is not a poetic exaggeration. It is a spiritual law written into the structure of the human soul. From the very beginning of human history, the greatest collapses did not begin with external enemies, political powers, or catastrophic events. They began inside the human heart, in the silent moment when desire was allowed to sit on the throne that belonged only to truth, obedience, and divine order. Desire is not evil in its existence, but it becomes destructive when it becomes the leader rather than the servant. Destiny, on the other hand, is fragile in one specific way. It cannot unfold properly when the soul is ruled by impulses instead of purpose. Many people believe destiny is fixed, immovable, and immune to daily choices. This belief is comforting, but it is false. Destiny is shaped continuously, not by grand decisions alone, but by the repeated direction of the heart. When desire leads, choices are rushed. When choices are rushed, wisdom is silenced. When wisdom is silenced, destiny begins to bend, distort, and eventually fracture. This is why so many people feel a deep sense of loss without being able to name what they lost. They did not lose success, money, or relationships first. They lost alignment. Throughout scripture and spiritual history, we see this pattern repeated without exception. Whenever a person allows appetite, fear, pleasure, pride, or impatience to take the lead, the consequences do not appear immediately. Desire is deceptive. It promises fulfillment, relief, control, or happiness, but it always hides the cost. Destiny does not collapse in one moment. It erodes quietly, and by the time the soul realizes what has happened, the path forward feels heavier, darker, and more confusing than it ever needed to be. This message is not about condemning desire, nor is it about promoting a life of emotional suppression. It is about restoring order. The human being was never designed to be ruled by impulse. We were designed to be led by the Spirit, governed by truth, and disciplined by wisdom. When this order is reversed, life becomes chaotic, even when it looks successful from the outside. Peace disappears, clarity fades, direction becomes uncertain, and destiny, instead of unfolding with purpose, begins to drift. In this series, we will explore how desire subtly takes control, how it reshapes decision-making, how it weakens spiritual perception, and why destiny always suffers when desire is allowed to lead. This is not a surface-level reflection. It is a deep examination of the inner war that determines the quality and direction of a human life, and it begins with understanding the first and most dangerous moment, when desire is mistaken for guidance. The moment. Desire replaces discernment. The most dangerous moment in a person's life is not when they fail publicly, fall into sin visibly, or collapse emotionally. The most dangerous moment is far quieter. It is the moment desire replaces discernment. This exchange rarely feels dramatic. In fact, it often feels logical, justified, and even necessary. Desire does not announce itself as rebellion. It disguises itself as urgency, need, passion, or self-care. And because of this disguise, many people surrender their discernment without ever realizing they have done so. Discernment is the ability to see beyond the surface of a choice. It weighs consequences, timing, alignment, and spiritual impact. Desire, on the other hand, is impatient. It does not ask whether something is right. It asks whether something feels good, relieving, exciting, or validating in the moment. When desire takes the lead, the question shifts from, is this aligned with who I am becoming, to will this satisfy what I feel right now? That single shift is enough to redirect an entire life. One of the most subtle dangers of desire is that it borrows the language of purpose. People often say, I felt led, when in reality they felt pulled. Being led implies guidance from a higher place. Being pulled implies attraction from a lower one. Discernment listens. Desire demands. Discernment waits. Desire rushes. Discernment is willing to endure discomfort for long-term alignment. Desire refuses discomfort at any cost. When these two voices conflict, the louder one often wins, not because it is wiser, but because it is more emotionally persuasive. Scripture consistently warns about this internal exchange. The flesh does not need to destroy destiny all at once. It only needs to take control of timing. Many things that are harmful are not harmful because they are always wrong, but because they are chosen too early, too late, or for the wrong reason. Desire has no respect for timing. It wants what it wants now. Discernment, however, understands that destiny unfolds in stages, and skipping one stage weakens everything that follows. When desire replaces discernment, boundaries begin to blur, convictions soften, rationalizations multiply. A person begins to explain choices instead of examining them. This is how spiritual sensitivity dulls over time, not through rebellion, but through repeated small compromises justified by emotional logic. The heart becomes accustomed to being obeyed, and the spirit becomes accustomed to being ignored. Eventually, discernment grows quiet, not because it disappeared, but because it was repeatedly overridden. Another critical consequence of desire-led decisions is distortion of identity. When discernment leads, choices reinforce identity. When desire leads, identity becomes reactive. A person begins to define themselves by what they crave, avoid, or chase. This creates instability because desire is inconsistent. What satisfies today may disgust tomorrow. What excites now may feel empty later. When destiny is built on desire, it has no stable foundation. It shifts with emotion, circumstance, and pressure. This is why people who follow desire often feel lost even when they are busy. Motion is mistaken for progress. Activity replaces alignment. Achievements pile up, but fulfillment remains absent. Destiny is not merely about reaching places or achieving outcomes. It is about becoming who you were designed to be. Desire cannot guide becoming because desire is focused on consumption, not transformation. There is also a spiritual cost to allowing desire to replace discernment, the loss of spiritual authority. Authority flows from alignment. When a person consistently chooses desire over wisdom, their inner confidence weakens. Doubt increases, fear grows louder. This is not punishment, it is consequence. The soul knows when it is out of order. And when the soul is out of order, it cannot stand firmly, speak clearly, or act boldly. Perhaps the most tragic aspect of this exchange is that many people sense it happening, but feel powerless to stop it. They recognize that certain choices are not aligned, yet they feel driven by inner pressure. This is the sign that desire has already been given leadership. Reclaiming discernment requires slowing down, embracing discomfort, and restoring silence. Desire thrives in noise. Discernment thrives in stillness. Destiny does not demand perfection, but it does demand order. When discernment leads, mistakes become lessons that strengthen the path. When desire leads, even successes become traps that delay growth. The difference is not what happens externally, but what governs internally. If this message resonates with you, it is not by accident. Awareness is the first sign that discernment is still alive within you. Do not ignore that signal. This series exists to help you restore the proper order, where desire serves purpose instead of ruling it, and where destiny is no longer sabotaged from within. If this content is helping you see more clearly and strengthening your spiritual direction, subscribe to the channel. These teachings are released regularly to help you walk with clarity, discipline, and purpose in a world that constantly pressures you to let desire lead. How desire corrupts time, patience, and God's process. One of the least understood truths about desire is that it does not merely influence what you choose. It fundamentally alters how you relate to time. When desire takes the lead, patience becomes unbearable, waiting feels like punishment, and God's process begins to look like an obstacle instead of protection. Destiny does not unfold instantly because it is not merely about arrival, it is about formation. Desire, however, has no interest in formation. It wants outcomes without refinement, rewards without endurance, and promises without preparation. This is where destiny begins to suffer silently, not because God withdrew it, but because the soul tried to outrun it. Time is not neutral in spiritual matters. Time is one of God's primary tools for shaping character, clarifying motives, and exposing what truly rules the heart. When a person is aligned, time works with them. Delays mature wisdom, silence strengthens faith, and waiting deepens dependence on God. But when desire leads, time feels hostile. Every delay is interpreted as denial. Every closed door feels unfair. Every season of stillness becomes unbearable. Desire does not know how to wait, because waiting strips it of control. This is why Scripture repeatedly connects impatience with spiritual failure. Impatience is not simply a personality flaw, it is a symptom of misplaced leadership. When the Spirit leads, the soul can endure tension without collapsing. When desire leads, tension feels intolerable. The person begins to interfere with God's timing, forcing relationships, accelerating decisions, compromising values, and stepping into situations they were never prepared to sustain. What looks like progress on the outside often becomes fragility on the inside. Many destinies are damaged not by wrong directions, but by right directions entered at the wrong time. Desire does not discern seasons. It sees opportunity and rushes. It sees loneliness and clings. It sees pressure and escapes. But God works through seasons for a reason. Every season carries a lesson, and skipping that lesson weakens whatever comes next. When desire rushes a season, it steals strength from the future. One of the greatest dangers of desire-led living is spiritual impatience with God Himself. The soul begins to question God's pace, methods, and silence. Prayer turns transactional. Faith becomes conditional. Obedience feels negotiable. Instead of asking, "What is this season forming in me?" the heart asks, "How do I get out of this season as fast as possible?" That shift alone is enough to distort destiny. Desire also corrupts patience by redefining success. When desire leads, success is measured by speed, visibility, and immediate gratification. But God measures success by alignment, endurance, and transformation. A fast breakthrough without depth creates a fragile future. A relationship entered prematurely becomes a source of pain instead of purpose. A calling embraced without maturity becomes overwhelming instead of empowering. Destiny is heavy. It requires strength to carry it. Time is what builds that strength. Another subtle way desire sabotages time is by making people allergic to silence. Silence is where discernment sharpens, motives are exposed, and God's voice becomes clear. Desire fears silence because silence removes distraction. In silence, the soul becomes aware of what it is avoiding. In silence, impatience surfaces. In silence, unresolved wounds speak. So desire fills time with noise, activity, entertainment, relationships, and constant motion. A busy life becomes a shield against waiting, but a destiny built in noise lacks clarity. There is also a spiritual deception connected to desire and timing, the illusion that delay means failure. Many people abandon God's process because they interpret waiting as stagnation. But waiting is not wasted time when God is involved. Waiting is where roots grow. What grows slowly grows strong. What grows quickly often collapses under pressure. Desire wants visible fruit without invisible roots. Destiny requires roots. Biblical history confirms this pattern repeatedly. Those who waited were prepared to carry weight. Those who rushed often paid a heavy price. Impulsive kings lost kingdoms. Impatient prophets faced unnecessary consequences. Even moments of blessing turned into burdens when entered without readiness. God's promises were never the problem. Human impatience was. Desire also distorts time by convincing people that later is safer than obedience now. When desire rules, obedience is postponed. Convictions are delayed. Necessary endings are avoided. People say, "I'll change later. I'll deal with this later. I'll obey when things calm down," but later becomes a moving target. Destiny does not wait forever. Opportunities expire, windows close, sensitivity dulls. What once felt urgent becomes optional, and what was optional becomes habitual. Patience is not passive. True patience is active trust. It is the decision to remain aligned even when nothing seems to be happening. Desire cannot tolerate that posture. Desire needs constant stimulation to feel alive, but the deepest transformations happen underground, unseen, uncelebrated, and slow. Destiny is shaped there, not on stages or in moments of excitement. When desire leads, people often mistake motion for obedience. They believe that as long as they are doing something, they are progressing. But activity does not equal alignment. You can move fast in the wrong direction. You can be productive while drifting. You can be busy while disobedient. God's process is not rushed by anxiety. Destiny unfolds according to purpose, not pressure. Perhaps the most painful consequence of desire corrupting time is regret. Regret is not simply sadness over mistakes. It is grief over what could have been protected. Many people look back and realize that what hurt them most was not God's delay, but their impatience, not God's silence, but their refusal to wait, not God's denial, but their inability to trust timing. Destiny suffered because desire demanded speed, yet even here, hope remains. God redeems time when leadership is restored. When discernment regains authority, patience slowly returns. Waiting becomes meaningful again. Silence becomes safe. Trust begins to rebuild. Destiny does not instantly repair itself, but it realigns. God is patient with those who return to order. If you feel convicted by this topic, it is not condemnation, it is invitation. An invitation to slow down, to stop forcing what God is still forming. To release the illusion of control and trust the process that protects your future. Desire must step down for destiny to rise. If this teaching is helping you understand your own seasons, delays, and inner struggles more clearly, subscribe to the channel. These messages are created to help you walk in alignment, patience, and spiritual clarity, so your destiny no longer suffers under the weight of unchecked desire. When desire distorts identity and silences conscience. One of the deepest damages caused by desire-led living is not immediately visible. It does not announce itself with chaos or collapse. Instead, it works quietly, reshaping identity from the inside until a person no longer recognizes who they are becoming. Destiny suffers at this level not because opportunities disappear, but because the person meant to carry them is slowly being altered. Identity is the vessel of destiny. When identity fractures, destiny leaks. At the beginning, desire does not feel like a threat to identity. It feels personal, authentic, even empowering. People often confuse desire with self-expression. They say, "This is who I am," when what they mean is, "This is what I want right now." Desire speaks the language of self-definition, but it does not offer stability. Identity rooted in desire shifts constantly because desire itself is unstable. What feels true today may feel foreign tomorrow. When desire becomes the primary guide, identity becomes reactive instead of anchored. Conscience exists to protect identity. It is not merely a moral alarm, it is a compass. Conscience signals alignment or misalignment long before consequences appear, but conscience requires humility to function. It requires the willingness to pause, to question, to submit impulses to truth. Desire hates this process. Desire sees conscience as an obstacle because conscience introduces friction. So desire does not attack conscience directly. It dulls it slowly. This dulling begins with rationalization. A person does not suddenly abandon their values, they reinterpret them. What once felt wrong now feels understandable. What once required repentance now requires explanation. Language shifts subtly. Convictions become personal boundaries. Sin becomes coping. Disobedience becomes self-care. Desire is very skilled at changing vocabulary while keeping direction. And once the language changes, the conscience grows quieter. As conscience quiets, identity begins to drift. A person may still look the same externally, still speak about faith, purpose, or calling, but internally there is a growing disconnect. The soul knows it is compromising, but the mind is busy justifying. This internal division is exhausting. It creates anxiety, confusion, and a constant need for distraction. Destiny requires wholeness. A divided soul cannot carry weight for long. Another consequence of desire-led identity is dependence on external validation. When identity is anchored in truth, validation is appreciated but not required. When identity is anchored in desire, validation becomes fuel. Approval feels like confirmation. Rejection feels like annihilation. The person becomes emotionally dependent on how others respond to their choices. This is dangerous because destiny often requires standing alone, enduring misunderstanding and obeying without applause. Desire cannot survive that environment. Desire also distorts identity by collapsing boundaries between impulse and self-worth. Instead of seeing desire as something they experience, people begin to see it as something they are. I am angry. I am lustful. I am fearful. I am impatient. Identity fuses with emotion. When this happens, resisting desire feels like self-betrayal instead of self-discipline. The soul confuses mastery with suppression and freedom with indulgence. Destiny cannot mature under that confusion. Conscience continues to speak during this process, but its voice becomes faint. At first, it whispers discomfort. Then, it sighs resignation. Eventually, it goes silent, not because it died, but because it was ignored too many times. Silence of conscience is one of the most dangerous states a human being can enter. Without conscience, desire no longer needs to argue. It rules unchallenged. Scripture warns that the heart can become hardened. Hardness is not cruelty, it is numbness. A hardened heart feels less, not more. It reacts instead of reflects. It consumes instead of discerns. Desire thrives in hardened hearts because resistance has weakened. Destiny, however, requires sensitivity. It requires the ability to perceive subtle direction, to respond to correction, and to adjust course quickly. A numb heart misses those signals. There is also a spiritual identity cost to desire-led living, loss of authority. Authority is not dominance over others. It is alignment within oneself. When a person consistently obeys desire, they lose credibility with their own soul. Promises to change feel empty. Convictions feel optional. Inner trust erodes. This internal erosion manifests as insecurity, overcompensation, defensiveness, or control. Destiny requires authority because destiny involves influence. A person who cannot govern themselves cannot steward impact. Desire-led identity often produces contradiction. A person may speak about discipline while avoiding discomfort. They may speak about faith while refusing obedience. They may speak about purpose while chasing pleasure. This contradiction creates inner tension that eventually demands resolution. Some resolve it by repenting and restoring order. Others resolve it by abandoning truth altogether. The second option feels easier in the short term, but devastates destiny in the long term. Another subtle effect of desire on identity is spiritual impersonation. People begin to perform versions of themselves they believe are acceptable, impressive, or safe. Instead of becoming who they are called to be, they curate who they appear to be. Desire loves performance because performance avoids transformation. Performance is controllable. Transformation is not. Destiny requires transformation because destiny demands depth, not image. Conscience, when restored, feels uncomfortable at first. People often mistake this discomfort for condemnation. But conviction is not condemnation. Conviction is alignment calling the soul home. The pain of restored conscience is the pain of nerves waking up after numbness. It is uncomfortable, but it is healing. Destiny cannot be recovered without restored sensitivity. The moment a person begins to listen again to conscience, identity starts to stabilize. Choices become clearer. Boundaries feel protective instead of restrictive. Silence becomes informative. Temptation loses some of its power because it is exposed rather than entertained. Desire does not disappear, but it loses authority. It becomes information instead of instruction. It is important to understand that desire itself is not the enemy. Desire becomes dangerous only when it is given the authority to define identity. When desire serves truth, it can be disciplined, redirected, and purified. When it rules, it corrupts. Destiny does not require the elimination of desire. It requires the subordination of desire. Many people fear that if they stop following desire, they will lose joy, passion, or authenticity. The opposite is true. When desire steps down, deeper joy emerges. Passion becomes purposeful. Authenticity becomes stable. Identity becomes coherent. Destiny stops leaking energy and begins to accumulate momentum. If you recognize yourself in this message, it means your conscience is still alive. Do not silence it. Do not rush past it. Let it do its work. Restoration always begins internally before it becomes visible externally. Destiny can still be protected, redirected, and fulfilled when identity is healed. If this teaching is helping you reclaim clarity, sensitivity, and inner alignment, subscribe to the channel. These messages are designed to help you restore order within, so your destiny no longer suffers under the quiet rule of unchecked desire. How desire sabotages obedience and weakens spiritual authority. There is a moment in every serious spiritual journey when obedience stops feeling inspirational and starts feeling costly. This is the moment desire begins its most aggressive resistance. Desire does not mind spirituality as long as it remains theoretical, emotional, or convenient. What desire cannot tolerate is obedience that contradicts comfort, delays gratification, or demands surrender. This is where destiny suffers deeply, because destiny is not carried by intention alone, but by obedience sustained over time. Obedience is not merely following rules, it is alignment in action. It is the decision to submit personal preference to higher wisdom. Desire views obedience as a threat, because obedience removes autonomy from impulse. When desire leads, obedience becomes selective. People obey what aligns with their feelings and resist what challenges them. This partial obedience feels reasonable, but spiritually it is corrosive. Destiny does not respond to partial surrender. Authority does not flow through compromised alignment. One of the first ways desire sabotages obedience is through negotiation. Instead of outright rebellion, the heart begins to bargain. I will obey later. I will obey in this area, but not that one. I will obey once conditions improve. Negotiation feels mature and thoughtful, but it is often fear disguised as logic. Desire prefers negotiation because negotiation delays surrender. and delay, over time, weakens resolve. As obedience weakens, spiritual authority diminishes. Authority is not charisma or confidence, it is coherence between belief and behavior. When actions contradict convictions, authority erodes internally first. A person may still speak with passion, but their words carry less weight. They may still pray, but their prayers feel strained. They may still believe, but belief feels hollow. This internal weakening is not punishment, it is consequence. Authority flows where alignment exists. Desire also sabotages obedience by reframing disobedience as freedom. The modern world glorifies autonomy without restraint. It teaches that self-denial is oppression and surrender is weakness. But spiritually, surrender is strength because it aligns the finite will with infinite wisdom. Desire rejects this truth. It convinces the soul that obedience will erase identity, suppress joy, or limit fulfillment. This fear keeps many people spiritually immature despite years of belief. Another way desire undermines obedience is through emotional justification. Feelings become excuses. I was tired. I was hurt. I was overwhelmed. While emotions are real, they are not reliable leaders. Obedience often requires action in contradiction to emotion. Desire resists this because it wants feelings to dictate behavior. Destiny, however, requires discipline beyond emotion. There is also a hidden cost to desire-led disobedience, fragmentation of the inner life. When a person consistently disobeys what they know to be right, they begin to compartmentalize. They separate spiritual language from daily behavior. Faith becomes something they talk about rather than live. This compartmentalization creates inner conflict. The soul knows it is divided, and division drains strength. Spiritual authority requires wholeness. A divided heart cannot stand firmly. This is why many people feel spiritually weak despite consuming spiritual content. Information without obedience produces frustration, not power. Desire loves information because information can be enjoyed without transformation. Obedience, on the other hand, demands change. Destiny is unlocked through transformation, not consumption. Desire also interferes with obedience by magnifying fear of loss. Obedience often requires letting go of relationships, habits, opportunities, or identities that no longer align. Desire exaggerates the cost of letting go and minimizes the cost of holding on. It convinces the soul that obedience will lead to emptiness, loneliness, or regret. But what desire hides is the cost of disobedience: stagnation, confusion, and delayed destiny. There is a profound spiritual principle at work here. Authority follows obedience. Those who obey consistently carry quiet strength. They do not need to prove themselves. Their presence carries weight. Their words carry clarity. Their actions carry impact. Desire cannot produce this kind of authority because desire refuses submission. Authority cannot grow where submission is rejected. Many people mistake spiritual authority for spiritual intensity. They believe passion equals power. But intensity without obedience burns out quickly. Authority is formed in consistency, not emotion. It grows in unseen choices, private discipline, and repeated surrender. Desire avoids these environments because they do not offer immediate reward. Another subtle way desire sabotages obedience is by shifting focus from faithfulness to outcomes. When desire leads, obedience is evaluated based on results. Did this work? Did this benefit me? Did this produce what I expected? True obedience does not ask these questions. It acts because alignment matters more than outcome. Destiny unfolds when obedience is sustained regardless of visible reward. The weakening of spiritual authority has ripple effects. Decision-making becomes harder. Discernment becomes clouded. Confidence becomes brittle. A person may become controlling to compensate for inner weakness or passive to avoid responsibility. Neither posture supports destiny. Authority grounded in obedience produces peace, not anxiety. Restoring obedience requires honesty. A person must identify where desire has been negotiating, delaying, or redefining surrender. This process is uncomfortable because it exposes attachment. But exposure is necessary for healing. Obedience is not restored through guilt, but through clarity. When the soul sees what it has been protecting, it can choose differently. Desire does not surrender easily. It will resist until it loses authority. But once obedience is restored, desire loses its grip. It becomes quieter. It stops demanding leadership. And in that space, spiritual authority begins to return. Not dramatically, but steadily. Confidence rebuilds, discernment sharpens, direction clarifies. Destiny does not require flawless obedience, but it does require sincere obedience. When the heart consistently chooses alignment over impulse, authority grows naturally. The soul becomes trustworthy again. God entrusts more to those who are aligned internally. If this message is challenging you, it is because obedience is being invited back into leadership. Do not resist that invitation. Obedience is not loss, it is protection. It preserves destiny by strengthening the vessel meant to carry it. If this teaching is helping you understand why obedience matters and how desire quietly weakens spiritual authority, subscribe to the channel. These messages are created to help you walk in alignment, strength, and clarity so your destiny no longer suffers under the rule of unchecked desire. Restoring order. When the spirit reclaims leadership and destiny heals. There comes a point in the journey where the damage caused by desire can no longer be ignored. The soul reaches a quiet exhaustion, not from effort but from misalignment. This is the moment when restoration becomes possible. Not because circumstances suddenly improve, but because the inner hierarchy begins to shift. Desire loses its throne, the spirit reclaims leadership, and destiny, though bruised, begins to heal. Restoration does not begin with dramatic external change. It begins with internal honesty. The soul admits what has been leading it. It stops defending impulse. It stops romanticizing appetite. It stops blaming circumstances. This honesty is painful because it dismantles illusion. But illusion is expensive. It costs clarity, peace, and direction. Truth, though uncomfortable, is restorative. When the spirit reclaims leadership, the first thing that returns is order. Order is not control, it is alignment. Thoughts slow down, emotions stop dictating behavior. Silence becomes tolerable again. Decisions regain weight. The soul no longer feels scattered. This is how destiny heals, not through sudden miracles, but through restored coherence. One of the clearest signs that the spirit has reclaimed leadership is the return of restraint. Restraint is not repression, it is strength under control. Desire reacts, the spirit responds. When restraint returns, impulses are no longer obeyed automatically. They are observed, evaluated, and either redirected or denied. This alone changes the trajectory of a life. Destiny does not require the elimination of desire, but it requires the mastery of it. Another sign of restored leadership is renewed patience. Patience is the fruit of trust. When the spirit leads, waiting no longer feels like abandonment. Delays feel purposeful. Silence feels instructive. The soul stops forcing outcomes and starts cooperating with process. Destiny unfolds best in this posture because it allows formation to catch up with calling. As the spirit leads, conscience awakens fully, sensitivity returns, conviction becomes clear but not crushing, the soul feels guided rather than condemned. This is critical because many people fear conviction, thinking it will destroy them. In reality, conviction protects them. It realigns them before damage becomes permanent. Destiny depends on this sensitivity. Without it, correction comes too late. Restoration also changes how a person relates to pain. When desire leads, pain is avoided at all costs. When the spirit leads, pain is interpreted. The soul asks, "What is this forming in me?" rather than, "How do I escape this?" This shift transforms suffering into instruction. Destiny is often forged in pain that is endured rather than escaped. Another powerful change occurs in relationships. Desire-led relationships are often transactional, driven by validation, comfort, or escape. Spirit-led relationships are purposeful. Boundaries strengthen. Discernment increases. Attachments are evaluated. Some connections deepen, others end. Though this can be painful, it is necessary. Destiny cannot thrive in environments that constantly pull the soul back into disorder. When the spirit leads, obedience regains meaning. It is no longer about fear of punishment or hope of reward. It becomes an expression of alignment. The soul obeys because it trusts the wisdom of the one leading. This kind of obedience restores spiritual authority quietly but powerfully. Confidence returns. Words carry weight again. Decisions feel grounded. Destiny healing is not instant. Some consequences remain. Some delays cannot be undone. Some scars stay visible. But healing is not about erasing the past. It is about redeeming direction. God redeems time by restoring order. What was delayed can still be fulfilled in a deeper, wiser form. What was broken can still be repurposed. Destiny is resilient when alignment is restored. Another profound shift occurs in motivation. Desire-driven motivation is fueled by lack. Spirit-led motivation is fueled by purpose. The soul no longer moves to fill emptiness, but to fulfill calling. This reduces anxiety significantly. Life stops feeling like a race and starts feeling like a journey with direction. As the spirit leads, identity stabilizes. The soul stops chasing versions of itself. It accepts formation. Authenticity deepens. The person no longer needs to prove who they are because they are becoming who they were meant to be. Destiny flows naturally from this identity because destiny is not something you chase, it is something you grow into. It is important to understand that restoring order does not mean desire will never challenge leadership again. Desire is persistent. It will attempt to reclaim authority during moments of fatigue, fear, success, or pain. But once the spirit has led, the soul recognizes the difference. Discernment sharpens, the contrast becomes clear, desire loses its deception. Perhaps the most beautiful outcome of restored leadership is peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of coherence. The soul knows who leads it. Decisions align with convictions. Actions reflect beliefs. Life feels integrated rather than fragmented. This peace is not fragile because it is not based on circumstances. It is based on order. Destiny does not suffer when mistakes happen. Destiny suffers when leadership is misplaced. When the spirit leads, even mistakes become teachers rather than destroyers. Growth accelerates, wisdom deepens, direction clarifies. If you have felt that your destiny has been delayed, distorted, or drained, this message is not an accusation. It is an invitation to restore order, to step down desire, to allow the spirit to lead again. Destiny does not need perfection. It needs alignment. If this teaching has helped you see where order must be restored and how your destiny can still heal, subscribe to the channel. These messages are created to help you walk under spiritual leadership with clarity, discipline, and purpose, so desire no longer rules and destiny no longer suffers.